Assalamu alaikum everybody. As everybody is slowly making their way back, I'm just going to give a few announcements and updates. As you're aware, and I hope everybody is benefiting from the course, we're very privileged to have Brother Dilly here and him share his expertise. As you've probably noticed from the presentations so far, as well as the workshops that have taken place, that we as imams or trainee imams are not taught this in this much detail, and it's what we are told that everybody has their expertise, so leave them to it. We will not be able to become experts in everything. We might be a mufti and we know our fiqh very well, but that doesn't mean we know banking very well, nor does it mean that we know interfaith related things very well. So it's great that we have Brother Dilly here. A reminder that the course is a registered course, so if anybody hasn't registered and has taken a pack, please can you register yourself. There is a charge for the course, I think it's £15. So if you haven't, please, at the back of the room there is a registration form. Please can you fill up the registration form. Also in the back we have some leaflets that you can take away with you and various literature that you can purchase. They're very cost price, so it's not very expensive. Darul Ilm has many teaching programs that it undertakes. So we have our flagship Alamiya program, which is the 6-year full-time Alamiya higher license in Islamic studies. Full-time, both for brothers and sisters. We have on-site, online as well, with expert teachers who teach, mashallah. We have a maktab for those who are our younger brothers and sisters, nephews and nieces, etc. We have then these short courses that take place throughout the year. One such one is this one. I think next month we have Sheikh Abdul Rahim Limbada coming to do a khulasa of Shama'il of Tirmidhi, the qualities of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a kitab by Imam Tirmidhi, but this one is a khulasa, which is a concise, summarized version. That's going to take place. I've got the dates here. I think it's on the 14th, on the 13th of October. We also have on the 2nd of October an online course on Khatm Nabuwat, on the finality of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that will take place. And we also have an upcoming course on menstruation, hayd, which is open for both online and on-site students, and that will take place on the 27th of October. So inshallah, I'd ask all the brothers and sisters inshallah to come back as we're going to start. I think Brother Dilly mentioned something beautiful earlier, that the Prophet ﷺ utilized the media, which was through writings or sayings, and one of the famous Sahabi was Hassan bin Thabit radiyallahu anhu, who used to propagate on behalf of the Prophet ﷺ. There's one story that Hassan bin Thabit heard that the Prophet ﷺ said, do X, Y, and Z, or Hassan. So he said, he went to Abu Hurairah, who actually narrated the hadith, and he said, Anshudak Allah, I adjure you with Allah. Hal sami'at al-Nabiyya sallallahu alayhi wa sallam yaqul. Did you hear the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Ya Hassan, ajib an Rasulillah, Allahumma ayyidhu bi ruhil qudus. O Hassan, respond on behalf of the Messenger of Allah. O Allah, aid him with the Ruh al-Qudus, with the Spirit. And there's another one when Bani Nadir was burning. Bani Nadir was the Jews, or the Jewish tribe in Medina. After they went into their forts, the Prophet ﷺ started burning the palm trees. So he said to Hassan, make a prose poetry and send it to the Quraysh. So he said, وَهَانَ عَلَى سَارَاتِ بَنِي لُؤَيٍّ حَرِيقٌ بِالْبُوَيْرَةِ مُسْتَطِيرُ. So he said, it's easy upon the leaders of Bani Lu'ay. Bani Lu'ay were the Jewish tribe. حَرِيقٌ بِالْبُوَيْرَةِ مُسْتَطِيرُ. That fire is burning in Buwaira, Mustatiru, all across. So Abu Sufyan bin Harith, who is the leader of the Quraysh, or from the Quraysh, he replied, he said, أَدَامَ اللَّهُ ذَلِكَ مِنْ صَنِيعٍ. May Allah continue that action of burning. وَحَرَّقَ فِي نَوَاحِيهَا السَّعِيرُ. And may He burn all the surroundings, meaning the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So let the fire continue and burn all the Muslims. As you're burning the plants and crops, may Allah burn you as well. سَتَعْلَمُ أَيَّنَا مِنْهَا بِنُزْهٍ. Soon you will know which one of us are free and safe from this fire. وَتَعْلَمُ أَيَّ أَرْضَيْنَا تَضِيرُ. And tomorrow or soon you will know which of our two lands is truly in harm. Very small couplets, but it was enough to actually fuel the propaganda and the media side of things. So alhamdulillah, the brothers have come back now, inshallah. We can start. So I'll pass it over to Brother Dili.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So just before we went for break, we had a very interactive session, mashallah, for many of you, if not most of you, some of the interview engagement that I saw both as guests and as interviewees, I was pleasantly surprised, mashallah. Besides pursuing Islamic knowledge, I think many of you could even potentially give Jon Snow or Piers Morgan a run for their job. May Allah bless you and preserve you all. Ameen. So, we did interview role play, and one of the activities I was going to do, but it wasn't a major activity. We were going to do 3 activities today. The main one was the role play. Because one of the things about the role play that we did was that these are conversations that you may actually have in everyday conversations with non-Muslim colleagues, non-Muslim peers, non-Muslims generally. You can have these conversations with them, and they have taken place in the workplace, whatever it may be, right? Or with teachers, maybe not as hostile as it was on the TV or as how we acted out, but these same conversations will most definitely occur in certain environments. So that's why activity 1, the role play, was very important. As you may have already noticed, that every single scenario was to do with some kind of controversial topic. Syria, ISIS, terrorism, LGBT, sexual grooming. Because sadly, that is what the situation the Muslim community has find itself in. Not because we have chosen this situation, it's a situation that we have found ourselves in. And by the way, am I wrong in this assessment, do you believe? Do you believe that the most of the media stuff that you see online or not online, on TV, is to do with these topics? Good, alhamdulillah. It's been proven, as mentioned earlier. Remember, I cited researches that said this is exactly what it is. The overwhelming majority of content on the mainstream media is to do with controversy. It's to do with something negative. Whether it be here, 1 positive to 21 negative, as I mentioned earlier, and in the United States, a disparity of 357% when it comes to Muslim related stories. So when these issues happen, whether you are part of an institution or an organization, or you're an imam or a scholar who has his own platform, or as an alima you have your own platform, when these stories emerge, essentially it's a crisis. It's what's known within the sector as a crisis management. When I underwent some training 2 years ago with the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, I underwent crisis management training. So inshallah, what I'm about to share with you is something which is generally shared across all sectors when it comes to crisis management. So whilst I am talking, I want everyone to look at these scenarios, very similar scenarios to what we dealt with earlier from the perspective of crisis management. One each. Sisters, you should have a handout of the scenarios and only deal with the ones which say at the bottom, the journalist has given you 48 hours to respond. Or one each to one person is fine. Or one between two is even fine. Ustad. So, whether you are an institution, whether you are a masjid, whether you are a Muslim organization, the very first thing that you should have is a media strategy. And the most basic thing as part of a media strategy is having a press officer or a media team. They will deal with all press inquiries. And when such a situation occurs with the handout that I've given, whether it is, again, staying on the theme of Muslims going to join Syria, or there's been an attack, or whether grooming gang related, etc., whatever situation it may be, and somehow it directly implicates you as an individual or your organization, then now this is what's regarded as a crisis. The media is now calling you. There may be some situation where they've even turned up outside the masjid, or they've turned up outside your house. Your phone is blowing, your office line is blowing, it's getting lots of phone calls, the media wants to get a response on a particular scenario that I've just given out to you. When this happens, you are not obliged to respond straight away. And the activity that we were going to do, and you can even do this activity at home, or after Salat al-Asr, or when you have about 5-10 minutes spare. When the media contacts you in response or in reaction to a particular story that directly affects you or your organization, you should give them a holding email or a holding statement. And all a holding email or a holding statement is, thank you very much for contacting Masjid Al Falaah. We have taken on board the question that you have posited. We will get back to you if and when we feel appropriate to respond to your questions. Or even something as simple as, thank you very much for contacting Masjid Al Falaah. We will get back to you shortly. That is what's regarded as a holding email or a holding statement. Nowadays, organizations issue statements on Facebook, and all you're literally doing is buying yourself time until a response is issued, or whether even a response is necessary. Sometimes newspapers will give you deadlines. Very rarely do they give you until the end of the day, unless it's a breaking news story. Sometimes they'll give you 48 hours, sometimes they'll give you 72 hours. Sometimes they may give you 5 days if it's a long, elaborated part of an investigation. The scenarios that were just handed out to you touches upon a number of things. Case of sexual groomers who attended Masjid Falaah. These are all hypotheticals, by the way. Sexual groomers who are arrested, they attended Jum'ah in your local masjid. And it just happened to be on that day that the Imam was giving a khutbah on the virtues of the marriage of Prophet ﷺ and Aisha radiallahu anha. Or that one of the groomers or one of the perpetrators of this crime attended the masjid, and it just happened to be that the Imam was narrating a story about, a concubine or a slave girl of one of the companions, and it was taken out of context. Or that you are a niqab, you're a sister in niqab, you are suing a school, but all of a sudden there's photos of you on Facebook and online of when you didn't wear the niqab and you didn't wear the hijab. These things happen in social media. So all of a sudden the only time you now wear the niqab is after marriage. So now you're posited questions, did your husband force you to wear it? How hypocritical. You're suing the school for rejecting your job application, but you only started wearing the niqab after marriage. So these are just examples that sometimes you can be directly implicated, right? Some individuals have gone out on a stabbing spree. They happen to attend Masjid Al Falaah. where the Imam was talking about the virtues of Asham and martyrdom. How many companions died fighting jihad fi sabilillah in land they're buried there, and the virtues of dying as a martyr. All of a sudden now, you support jihad and terrorism. Sadly, this noble concept of ours has become synonymous with terrorism and violent acts. Right? So these things can happen, and when these things happen, inshallah they don't happen, but when these things happen, and they have happened, where the lazy journalism has resulted in them just wanting a scoop, you just issue a holding email or a holding statement. Sometimes they'll give you a deadline, and then you have to make sure this is from our religion, this is from our deen, that we consult with management, with those who are knowledgeable in those respective areas, whether it's legal advice, media advice. And then a decision has to be made as to whether you need to respond or not. I have been involved in cases where a Muslim organization was contacted by many media outlets and they chose not to respond, and there was no story. I've also seen situations where a Muslim organization has responded and there's been no story. I've also seen the fact that sometimes they've not responded and they've run with the story and said that we contacted this organization for a comment, but they did not get back to us via the deadline. So I've seen many variations, and each case is subjective and relative to whatever circumstances that you may or may not find yourself in. And today's activity, or this activity rather, and I would like you all to just practice it, if you ever can. Yeah, if you have, it doesn't take that long. That if you were contacted by the media about something controversial relating to your masjid, your organization, your institution, or even you yourself, something that you posted 3 years ago was misinterpreted, and all of a sudden now the Imam of Masjid Al Falaah is an anti-Semite, how would you respond to the media? Right? Remember, rule number 1, a holding email. Very simple, 1 or 2 lines. But if you do decide to issue a statement, as in a press release, the golden rule is that every press release should include the 5 W's. What, where, when, why, who. And these 5 W's is the basis, if not the entire basis, of every press release. Irrelevant of topic, irrelevant of sector, industry. The 5 W's is the basis of all press releases. Whether you are issuing a statement as an individual, as someone who is prominent in the community and has a massive following online, etc., or whether you're issuing a statement as an organization or as a masjid or as an institute, your press releases should include the 5 W's. A press release should be between 100 to 300 words and should always have contact details of the organization, but ideally a media or press officer. A press release is also a good strategy to just issue one position for all outlets. You want to say one thing, get it on record, so everyone can now cite and reference that statement. So today's exercise was to first and foremost to see how you all would issue a holding email or a holding statement. It doesn't require that much eloquence. Sometimes it can literally be as short as, thank you very much, we've received your inquiry, we will get back to you shortly. That's it. With press releases, maybe inshallah Mufti Tasir and Masjid Al Falaah can, if there's some spare time or if I return again, we can look at how to formulate a press release on those particular scenarios that you were given. But how would you issue a press release? But generally the golden rule is the 5 W's, which is on the workshop notes that you have. Now if the situation is really bad, like the story is super breaking, like a relative of yours or your son, or God forbid, or something that's really immediate and breaking, and you need advice beyond shura within your respective organization, you should not be shy or hesitate to seek legal advice. You should not hesitate to seek legal advice. And in fact, this is something I need to start seeing more Muslim organizations and institutions doing. Sometimes we are hesitant to pursue the legal route because there's an assumption that there are too many costs associated to it. You'll find that many of these cases are no win, no fee. There are no costs attributed to it. If you or your organization or your institution find yourself in such a sticky situation, you need legal advice, please write the following names down. Bindmans, Bindmans LLP. Bindmans LLP. The second law firm I'd like you to write down is Carter Ruck. The third law firm that I'd like you to write down is Rahman and Lowe, L-O-W-E, Rahman and Lowe. These three law firms are fantastic law firms, some of the best libel and defamation law firms. Yes? Okay, so Bindmans, B-I-N-D-M-A-N-S, Bindmans, Carter Ruck, and Rahman and Lowe. These three law firms are one of the best law firms in this country when it comes to Muslim-related issues to do with defamation and libel, anti-terrorism, etc., etc. Never hesitate to seek legal advice if a situation is that bad. And if your case is genuinely that strong, you'll find that there are no costs attributed to it. A lot of today's training, unfortunately, has been around negativity, right? And it is not from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and is not befitting of the believers to be pessimistic and negative in their mindset. No. Optimism and always thinking and believing in the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in fact from our religion. This is what the mindset of the believer is. That he is positive, he is optimistic, he is pleased and accepting of the decree of Allah, he remains patient whilst remaining active, and he indeed does not succumb to a victimhood mindset. Now, a victimhood mindset is very different to acknowledging that one is a victim. Those are two different things. Someone who has been wronged is a victim. And if it happens en masse, so regularly, then there is an issue within the community where there is injustice happening to a particular community. To highlight that does not make you someone who is perpetuating a victimhood complex. Victimhood complex or mindset is when you acknowledge that wrong is being done to you and you don't want to do nothing about it. That's the difference. And Muslims are not from that. We should not be those people. We acknowledge wrong is being done to us. We acknowledge lies are being spread about our religion. But we will not sit and do nothing. We will indeed respond and act accordingly. So we are not entirely powerless. We can hold the media to account. But to hold the media to account, we need to know on what basis we are going to hold them to account. We need to know the difference between what is libel and what is slander. We need to understand, at least on a cursory basic level, what is defamation from a media law point of view. And I've included the definitions in your media workshop notes. The definition of libel, the definition of slander, and the definition of defamation, and how the two are different. But just to go over it, libel is when something that's defamatory has been issued about someone in writing or published. Slander is when something has been said, spoken on any other platform besides written or published. Both fall under defamation. Now there's a whole plethora and sub-contexts and sub-definitions and sub-caveats from a legal point of view as to how strong a case is. So you have to prove things like, did this journalist say this and substantiate it beyond reasonable doubt? Was this person contacted for a comment? Can this person, or can the journalist or the newspaper substantiate that there was no damage to the individual's reputation? Were they contacted for comment? Etc. Right? And even this whole thing about whatever they said about an organization or a mosque or a group or an imam, what is beyond reasonable doubt? It's very ambiguous. And to go into this is an entirely different workshop about media law. But what you do need to know is that libel, slander fall under defamation, and if something has been said or written about you or your organization or your institution, and it falls within those, broadly speaking, falls within those categories, you can seek legal advice. But you can also file complaints to regulators. Ofcom, the Office of Communications, it regulates all telecommunications and postal mediums. In the context of today's media training, Ofcom regulates all broadcast TV and radio stations. They were formed in 2003. I've provided a link to their code of standards. A lot of the code of standards are quite elaborate, many pages. It's best if you search it online and have a read of it, inshallah. The vast majority of the national newspapers, is regulated by IPSO, the Independent Press Standards Office. That was established in 2014, and it took over from the Press Complaints Commission in 1990. And IPSO regulates the vast majority of the mainstream national newspapers. There's another regulator called Impress. They're smaller and more independent, and they are for smaller and more independent publications, like 5 Pillars. So if I, God forbid, say anything or write anything, inshallah, that will never happen, you can file a complaint about 5 Pillars to Impress. We are regulated by Impress, which makes 5 Pillars the only independently regulated Muslim news website in the English language in Europe, North America, South America, and Australia. There is no other news website in the English language for the Muslim community that is independently regulated except for 5 Pillars. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that more Muslim media outlets do become independently regulated. Why? It's to show a serious commitment to journalism. We became regulated in 2016, at the end of 2016. That was a commitment for us to tell the Ummah that, look, we're serious about our journalism. We are confident about our ethics and our values as trained journalists to deliver news. You may not like our style sometimes, you may not like some of the content that we cover, but we are regulated. We are answerable to an external regulator. It's not Wild Wild West for us anymore. If I can kindly have someone to give these out. So, brothers and sisters, you are getting another scenario, and I would like you all to take 5 minutes to read these scenarios in pairs or in threes. And I want you, after 5 minutes, I'm going to ask each group questions. And inshallah, hopefully, based on what I've just told you on this slide, you'll be able to answer some of these questions. So, whilst they are being given out, ideally in groups of 3, or maybe even 4. That's fine, 3 or 4. So, Ofcom regulates broadcast, TV and radio. IPSO regulates all the mainstream national newspapers. Impress regulates the smaller newspapers and websites, and news websites. And what is very important before you start this exercise is the Leveson inquiry. Who heard about the News of the World phone hacking scandal? Can I say show of hands? Yes. So News of the World, a very well-known newspaper, embarked on some very unethical strategies. They employed very unethical strategies to obtain information, like they hacked phone calls, they applied listening devices, they did some very, very unethical things, right? And therefore the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, he basically called upon, I don't say Lord Leveson, just Mr. Leveson, to carry out an independent investigation into the ethical practices of the press. So Mr. Levison started looking into all the newspapers, what kind of things that were getting up to, why and how they were employing certain unethical practices, listening devices, hacking phone calls, hacking phone emails, entrapment, etc., etc. And Mr. Levison concluded that there were indeed some very unethical practices taking place. And what was born out of that Levison inquiry was the Press Regulations Authority. Now listen to this. IPSO refused to sign up to the Press Regulations Authority. They said, no, this will affect our independence. Do you know that IPSO, so this is the regulator which regulates the vast majority of the national newspapers, when you file a complaint to IPSO about this newspaper that said something about you or your organization or about Muslims, those who deal with the complaints are former editors of those same newspapers. This is one of the things that Mr. Levison highlighted. He goes, how is it that for the very same regulator which regulates independently these newspapers, the people that are dealing with these complaints are the former editors of these same newspapers? This was exactly the same problem with the Macpherson inquiry, with the murder of Stephen Lawrence, that the Police Complaints Commission was all made up of a panel of ex-police officers. How can there be a level of fairness and objectivity to hold an institution to account when it's made up of people who were formerly from these organizations? So this is one of the things that Mr. Levison concluded. So IPSO refused to sign up to Levison Inquiry's findings. The Press Regulators Authority. Impress, however, did. And that is why Five Pillars decided to go with Impress. We could have also gone for IPSO. Obviously the fees were very high. But we went with Impress. Not only was it the cheaper option, but it was the more principled option. It showed commitment to our journalism. But the truth is that IPSO has become a significant power in and of themselves. IPSO is stronger and bigger than the Levison Inquiry. IPSO is bigger than any kind of independent investigation because these are essentially run by former editors and newspapers that are paying very, very high subscription fees to essentially regulate themselves. So what you have been given in terms of a scenario, again, is a breaking news story. Something's taken place, and I would like you all to take 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, to answer those 3 questions based on what I've told you. And this, I'll leave the slides up there, but I would like to know the answer from those scenarios. You have 5 minutes to do that, inshallah. The Levison inquiry tried. Yes, I do. These. Sisters just cut them. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, just tell them to fold it. Rabina? So what is wrong with the report? Who do you file a complaint to? And does this fall under libel or slander? I'd like to know those three, the answers to those three. Do we need them? That's fine. It's another minute, inshallah. What is wrong with the headline? Who is it that we filed the complaint to? And does it constitute as libel or slander? Okay. Who had scenario 1? Can I say show of hands of who had scenario 1? Okay. Can someone from the group tell me what is wrong with the headline of the story? So your scenario was Masjid Al Falah's Imam urged worshippers to fight in Syria, right? What is wrong with that headline based on the background of the story? And why would that be untrue in the context of what actually happened?
Most of the stuff is saying about the virtues of being a martyr.
Fantastic. 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 So what you find with scenario 1 is that the Imam of the Masjid, the headline is Masjid Al Falah's Imam urged worshippers to fight in Syria. When the truth is that the Imam, all he did was he delivered a khutbah on the virtues of Ash-Sham. And in the same khutbah he mentioned the companions who passed away in Syria. And in the same khutbah he praised those who died in Syria as martyrs. Now all of a sudden that's interpreted as urging worshippers to go and fight in Syria. But there's also another important context here for those who are on scenario 1. There is another talk online where you condemn ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This now gives you a basis, a legal basis, to say, how could you accuse me of this when on record I am there to have condemned and criticized these two organizations? So who do you file the complaint to? Which regulator? Impress. No, it's Ipso. The Daily Mail is a national newspaper. The Daily Mail is a national newspaper and it is regulated by Ipso. So you would find the complaint to Ipso. Is it libel or slander? Pardon? Yes, it's libel because it's in print. Good. Who had scenario 2? Scenario 2. What is wrong with the headline and the story? Yeah.
And that's now equated to him promoting slave girls and child marriage.
Okay. So the Telegraph issued a headline: groomers attend talks at mosque about slave girls and child marriage. And what's the background? The background is that some perpetrators attended the masjid for Friday prayers, where the Imam delivered a khutbah where he spoke about ghanima. In a historical context, he's talking about ghanima, which was mentioned. In the same khutbah, the Imam narrated an account of a slave girl who was speaking about the justice of the Sahaba. And that was now taken as promoting or had inspired the groomers. So what is actually wrong with that headline based on the last point? The fact that in another talk, what did the Imam do? He praised the Prophet's marriage to Aisha anha. So, essentially what's happened here, and these are real life scenarios by the way. These scenarios that you have taken place. So what's happened here, and which is very common, is that when these topics are discussed, whether in a one-day course or in a khutbah or in a lecture, a video will be published on YouTube, and all it takes is a journalist just to take 30 seconds or 10 seconds or 15 seconds and to concoct a story and just to put dots and links that don't exist together. Right? Who would you file the complaint to? Yes. And is it libel or slander? Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair. Who has scenario 3? What is wrong with the report? Parent leading protest against RSC is a homophobe who supports killing gays. Wow, powerful. What's wrong with that report? Absolutely. But where did they get this whole kind of killing gays? Where did they get that from? What is it that the parent did that they've based that headline on? Yes. So there was a parent once, recently actually, who praised Brunei for a had punishment which they introduced, and they shared the article in the news of a clap and thumbs up emoji, and it wasn't wise, to be honest, but it definitely didn't necessitate this kind of headline, right? And on the slide about social media, we do need to be aware of these things, how we post, what we post, and how we articulate our views. That was spot on. Jazakallah khair. And who would you file the complaint to? Fantastic. And does it fall under libel or slander? Yes. Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair. Remember, on the handouts, you've got the links to actually go through the regulations and the standards codes. And inshallah, I've also sent Mufti Tasir the online copies, so hopefully they should be accessible to everyone, inshallah, at some point, or those who have registered for the event. Who had scenario 4? Hey, who skipped scenario 4? It was about Birmingham as well. Hey, okay, I'll go over scenario 4. Scenario 4, ITV News reported Birmingham terrorists radicalized at mosque which glorified jihad and martyrdom. The background is that the ITV did not include a statement from the mosque representative. And they based that story on that a perpetrator of this crime attended some prayers and talks at Masjid Al Falaah. By the way, this is all hypothetical. Please, I don't want anyone to take... This is all hypothetical scenarios. The local imam delivered a sermon on the virtues of jihad. And they got an external Sheikh Fulan who spoke about the lofty status of martyrs. This happens a lot. It happened, and it's been happening for so long, where we've had everything from undercover reporters to those who have, for whatever reasons and difficulties and challenges they faced in their life, they've left the deen of Islam, but they attended certain courses before, or talks online, they'll take snippets of khutbahs and speeches, and they'll basically use that to justify headlines such as this. The thing that's wrong with this report is that the talk was entirely historical. It was not relevant, it was not direct, it was not specifying any particular place of warfare in today's era. It was talking about the virtues of jihad as a concept, as a practice from a classical point of view. And the external sheikh was merely talking about the virtues of martyrdom. And we know that there are many virtues of the martyr. But how that was twisted by the ITV News report to say that the masjid was now propagating people to go and fight jihad and die as martyrs. And the proof is that this Birmingham terrorist only attended some prayers. And that whatever he or she went on to do had no direct correlation to what the imam or the khatib was saying. That's what's wrong with the report. I would file the complaint to Ofcom and it falls under slander. Scenario 5. What is wrong with LBC Radio's report? MashaAllah, fantastic. There's nothing I don't add to that. That is exactly what was wrong with it. So the problem number 1 is that they did not include her full comment. And remember, they're not obliged to include your full comment. That's the worrying thing as well. But then sometimes we are at fault. I've been with some mashayikh and some activists. When the media contacts them for a comment, they start writing an essay. They're not going to report this. Sometimes you should be concise and succinct to your point. But yes, the issue here is that they did not include the full comment. Most would do, some don't. The other issue is that they've taken everything entirely out of context and they've applied their own assumption. That she started wearing the woman who's suing the school started wearing the niqab because she was forced to do so after marriage. Entirely based this on untrue, and they've based it on some photos on Facebook. Who would you file the complaint to? And is it libel or slander? Fantastic. Jazakumullah khair. Fantastic. MashaAllah. So just before we move on to the next slide, and as today's training is coming to a close, never feel shy or apprehensive to file complaints. Complain away, even if they get rejected. Right? But at least do it with an understanding of how Ofcom operates, how IPSO operates, how Impress operates, what is their code of standards, what is that they have to fulfill before they publish something. Whilst many of the things are grey areas, sometimes you will find newspapers and TV channels slipping up on very basic rules. Sometimes newspapers intentionally breach the code of practice because they're so hell-bent on getting a story across, they're happy to be taken to court and just pay out a court settlement. Sometimes they've ruined the reputation of entire organizations. Yeah? And they don't care. They're going to find, okay, we've issued an apology. Here's 30, 40, 50,000 pounds. The damage is really done. Because if you compare a front page headline to a small apology 2 months later, what's created the most damage? That front page news. Not the apology and correction that came 3-4 weeks later. I know many ulama who are very dear to me, very close to me from different groups, different backgrounds. They have all been affected by this, sadly. Again, I would like to include on positive notes. It's not all doom and gloom. Most of it is, but it's not all doom and gloom. And there are and have been cases of positive media engagement, and this is something which I would like the leadership of this masjid and those who have leadership roles in institutions to take note. The vast majority of positive media coverage will come from local and regional media. Your local newspaper, even the Birmingham Mail isn't great. They're nearly as bad as the Mail, but hey, yeah, they won't be as bad as the Mail. Yeah, the local radio station and the regional TV, so BBC West Midlands or BBC Midlands, BBC South Today. It is the local and regional media that you'll get the vast majority of positive coverage. Why? Because these media outlets, they are heavily reliant upon local communities. And they don't want to upset large demographics. So if they see that in Birmingham there is a large Muslim population, and they need, as a general rule, I'm not saying they all comply with this, they see as, okay, we can't upset the Muslim community because they're so vast in numbers. They've got many councillors, they've got many mosques, they make up like 30+% of the population of the city. What you find in Bradford, in Birmingham, in parts of East London, you'll find that the local media there, is less hostile than the national. That's not to say that local and regional media can't be hostile, but generally positive media engagement comes from local and regional media. Therefore, it is absolutely essential to build relationships. Absolutely important. And when I say building relationships, I don't just mean inviting them to an annual visit my mosque day. I'm very sorry, this is not building relationship. May Allah bless the Muslim Council of Britain and all those who are involved in this fantastic project. But let's be real about this. The doors of our masajid need to be open with, of course, a relevant security in place. It needs to be open to the community, right? And it shouldn't just be an annual or biannual event. We need to build relationships with the local press. And it's not just the editors and the journalists. It's about being strategic in your thinking. Build a relationship with a receptionist, given that they are male. Build a relationship with a producer or an admin. You have to build connections. That's how you build relationships. You build connections. Someone can whisper or utter a good word in your defense. Trust me, I have worked in a news desk. I've worked in a newsroom where an editor is literally at the brink of approving a story, and because the admin girl or the receptionist has said, you know what, I actually know that person. They're not actually that bad. I think you need to meet them for a coffee. And he hasn't published the story. So these things are very important. We must build relationships. And building relationship with local media, I'm not saying it always works, by the way. But I've seen it. It has worked. A whisper or a nudge of positive encouragement about a community or an institution does go a long way. At the very least, it'll make them think that, okay, let me exhaust it again to find out what's really happening. It's also an opportunity for us to own the narrative. We don't have much control over the narrative about how Islam and Muslims are portrayed in mainstream media. We don't. We're actually shackled and succumb to what they write about. Whereas with local media, we do have a lot of significant control. We do have a sense of ownership. Simply because, as I mentioned, local and regional media are generally reliant upon respective communities to give them news. When I worked at the Bedfordshire on Sunday and Luton on Sunday, if the community didn't really like me as a reporter, or they didn't like my newspaper because I upset them about something, they won't give me news. They won't give me tip-offs. They won't give me tales. They won't send me press releases. So it's easier to build these relationships. And as I mentioned in the slide about crisis management, your press releases need to be on point. The 5 W's need to be on point. Between 100 and 300 words. Within that press release, you need to include why this particular story that you're pitching to the media outlet is unique. Don't make it long and boring because it will just go into trash. And of course, if you are in a position to give exclusivity of a story, that's also a good way of engaging the local and regional media and even the national media. What I mean by exclusivity is that if you have a very good story, if you have a really good positive story, and you know that this is something that someone would want to cover, like the masjid is going to break a Guinness World Record for something for charity. You can go and give it to one newspaper and say, look, I'm giving you guys the exclusive. Are you going to cover it? And last but not least, and I've already mentioned this, and it's linked to basically building relationship, is that we need to invite the local press to events, and we need to network with them. And network just doesn't mean networking with them in the masjid, or in a masjid fun day, or one Eid, and these kind of things. Why don't you find out whether the editor likes golf? Why don't you find out if the journalist likes certain sports? Why don't you meet them for lunch or coffee? It doesn't always have to be in a masjid event. Because it just seems unfair, to be honest. To the regional media, that, oh, by the way, we will only engage with you on our visit at mosque day, on our open days. Find out if there's any halal activities that these members of the press get up to, and build relationships. Because these relationships will go a long way. Social media. Social media, eh? I kept the crazy things to the last. Social media, brothers and sisters, respected ulama and elders, social media and the age of the internet has done many things to our surroundings. First and foremost, from the perspective of the media, news and information now travels instantaneously. Time and distance is no longer an issue. Someone in Australia may be well aware of what's happening in Birmingham before you wake up from sleep because of social media and internet. That's the reality of it. And what that's actually done is that it's made the earth, Allah's earth, a very small village now. That's what internet and social media has done. because of how fast news travels. You no longer have to be in a particular place to know exactly what's happening in that place, in that region or respective country. Social media, and this is something that my friends in IT and coding and all this kind of stuff, because when you get involved in social media, there's always an online footprint. There's nothing that you have said or posted or done that cannot be traced back through some coding or caches or something. And I used to get paranoid. I'm like, are you serious? Or even after I've deleted it and erased my history and all this kind of stuff, they can still find it. He goes, yes, absolutely. If they really want to find it, they can find it. That's very worrying. That's very worrying. And the amount of ulama and du'at who have posted things online about various issues, usually in response to something. A very common one was when Gaza was being bombed, and you say something about Israel, and the wording has been interpreted as being anti-Semitic. Or something that we've said about the relationship between man and wife, and then a sheikh has said something about the wife, and it's been regarded as misogynistic, yeah, or as promoting domestic violence. I have seen so many of these issues, and nearly always it's down to two things when it comes to social media: emotion and statements out of context. And there's always an online footprint. Let's forget about Muslims. Let's even look at what's happening now. The Labour Party has had a witch hunt of councillors and even an MP who have been deselected, who have been fired because they have posted things which have been regarded as anti-Semitic. The most prominent case is Naz Shah, MP for Bradford West. She posted something on Facebook where she put the landmass of Israel into United States and said, that's where it needs to be. It makes more sense for it to be there. I understand it. I don't think that's anti-Semitic. But the Labour Party did, and she was deselected from the Home Affairs Select Committee. I believe there's been councillors in Birmingham who have posted things in response to the invasion of Gaza. They've posted things emotionally, and they've been deselected or they've been fired. So all I'm saying here is that when we use social media, please, for the sake of Allah, use it responsibly. Especially if you are ulama, you are aspiring scholars, you are leaders and representatives of institutions, please, please, please use with much due diligence and care. Social media is a fantastic vehicle for good, for da'wah, for activism, for fundraising, for raising awareness. But it can also be a vehicle for many bad things and very negative things, like most things. So use it for the purposes which is beneficial to Islam and Muslims and wider society, and try to refrain from those things which could get us into trouble as a community, as individuals, as institutions. Another thing that's reflective of the social media and internet era is the virality of news. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran for us to verify news and information when it comes from someone who is a wrongdoer. So when you receive news that's doing the rounds, it happens on WhatsApp, bam, 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 it comes constantly, yeah, or one video or something, or one clip is doing the entire rounds, right? Verify it. Verify whether this piece of information that you're receiving on WhatsApp groups is true. And if it happens to be true, well, if it's not true or it's not entirely substantiated, then you shouldn't share it. But if it is true, then you have to ask yourself this question: what is the harm and benefit to Islam and Muslims for me sharing this piece of information? I'm sure the students of knowledge here, that you know the concept of outweighing the maslaha and the mafsada and these things apply here as well. You've received a piece of information, it may even be a 5 pillars article. Wallahi, it might even be something that I've written or my organization has published, and you have to make that judgment. Is it true? Has it been substantiated? Is it a benefit for me to share it, or would it cause further harm? These are things which have to be factored. And last but not least, to parents and to teachers, please monitor very closely how children use social media. Beyond the issue of news and viral information, there are many things which take place on social media which are very, very problematic and has caused many, many issues within our community, from children as young as 8, 9, 10 and 12. I appreciate some of the difficulties and challenges, and I say this as someone who has no children, but I can understand. I have 14 nephews and nieces. Now sometimes in a busy schedule, it's just easy to give them an iPad or an iPod and get them just crack on with YouTube and get them. But please monitor what they're doing. Monitor who they're seeing. Monitor who they're following. Social media has been used as a vehicle for bullying. I'm sure everyone's seen videos of children being beaten up or bullied, and it's just done the rounds. We know that certain kinds of grooming has taken place via social media. Not just sexual, but things related to embarking on certain acts which are un-Islamic, but it's presented as Islamic. Yeah? As well as drug dealing. I heard that drug dealers now use Snapchat and Instagram to sell weed. Right? This is the madness of the society that we now live in. And of course, the issue of role models. At an age where we have Instagram MUAs, which stands for makeup artists, or makeup, I don't know, MUAs, but basically sisters who do hijabs, tutorials, and now brothers don't laugh. There's brothers who also flex their muscles and think they're the next Arnie. And this is true. So we need to be mindful, and whilst, they're covering their aura, and there seems to be a synthetic, a kind of outwardly perception, they might be Islamic, but sometimes we have to also monitor what the children and the youth are following in terms of role models. It's actually a known strategy, and I'm telling you this. It's actually a known strategy now amongst Instagrammers and YouTubers that they come across first as Islamic to win over and establish a Muslim audience, and once they've established their Muslim audience, less Islamic, less Islamic, less Islamic. Wallahi, this has happened. I'm not going to mention no names or any examples, but this is an actual strategy. So be mindful of these things. To conclude today's media training, I want to give you all some advice. The Prophet ﷺ said that this deen is advice. And I want to conclude by giving you all some advice, some words of encouragement and inshallah of empowerment. Those of you who are scholars, aspiring scholars, students of knowledge, representatives of respective organizations and institutions, there is no need to be shy about writing your thoughts, writing blogs, making vlogs. There is nothing wrong with building an online profile. There's nothing wrong with it. But like everything, there are parameters, there are remits, there are laws and values and principles that our deen teaches which dictates what we can and cannot do. There is absolutely nothing wrong with opening up a Facebook page or a Twitter account or an Instagram account and using it for the benefit of Islam and Muslims and wider society. Nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with you discussing the affairs of the ummah on these platforms, or raising money for a good cause on these platforms, or to enjoin good and forbid evil on these platforms. There's nothing wrong with that. But use social media responsibly, because wallahi it has come to bite many in the wrong way. Many have posted things and said things which they have forgotten about. Let me give you an honest example. I'm going to give you an honest example from my life. I one time said something about a group called the Qadianis. I said it in 2014 or 15. Totally forgot about that. I tweeted it. And I tell you now, the language itself wasn't good. If I look back at now, I believe in the same thing, but would I have worded it in that way? Absolutely not. I forgot about it. 3 years later, I'm seeing there's nearly a viral campaign happening on Twitter about this person comparing human beings to X, Y, and Z. This was entirely my fault. Entirely my fault. Even though I unequivocally disagree with these people and do not regard them to be Muslims, the language I used to describe them was not something which was, conducive or reflective of someone who is, or at least perceived as a representative of the community. And this has happened many times with many people regarding many issues. Palestine, Israel, Jews, homosexuality, hudud, so many examples. Wallahi, I can literally give so many. Where we've said things and posted things which we wholeheartedly believe, but because of whatever reason we've worded in a very, very bad way. And it's come to affect us later on. Read news from as many media outlets as possible. You have to. Don't just think, I'm a Guardian reader, I'm an Al Jazeera reader, I'm just a 5 Pillars reader, if any of you exist out there. Right? Broaden your horizons, read news, take news from as many outlets as possible. Why? Because it will broaden your horizon to understand how different media outlets are interpreting news. What's the right-wing press saying? What's the left-wing press saying? What's the centre-left saying? What's the independent saying? What's the Guardian saying? You'll find in most cases they're not. Generally speaking, the liberal media establishment, they agree on most things, generally speaking. But there will be differences. What's Al Jazeera saying? What's 5 Pillars saying? What's Press TV saying? What's Islam 21C saying? You have to broaden your horizon and accept news from as many sources as possible. For myself, I have to do this. Because sometimes there are certain strategies which the mainstream media applies, which can come handy for me. There's absolutely nothing wrong with taking certain strategic styles and means from those who actually use those styles and means against us and our community and our religion. So as long as you don't transgress the boundaries. I am proud to say that I read the Daily Mail and I read the Sun. Do you know why? Because no other newspaper besides those two can cover a story in such few words and get whatever message that they want to get across to their readership. We can call the Sun and the Daily Mail the gutter press, yellow journalism. Why is it that they're the most read newspapers in the country? Those two newspapers are the most read newspapers in the country. The white van man who comes to sort your plumbing out, who comes to sort your electricity out, who comes to do your scaffolding. Just watch what newspaper they read. Wallahi, they're not reading the Independent or the Guardian. They'll be reading the Daily Mail or the Daily Mirror or the Sun. And that's because the art of how they apply language is so powerful that it's easy just to take in. Especially at a time where the attention span of people is lessening and lessening, it's easier to just read a headline and a paragraph. I know what happened in that story. So me as a journalist and 5 Pillars are constantly looking at the styles and means of the mainstream press. Because we utilize those same styles and means. So long as we don't transgress boundaries and stay within the Islamic ethical code. Familiarize yourself with the language of propaganda. I'll be done in about 5 minutes, inshallah. Familiarize yourself with the language of propaganda. That's fine.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
To conclude, I'll take a few more minutes. We need to familiarize yourself with the language of propaganda. Try refrain from using language and words which those who want to seek to harm our community use against us. So words such as extremist, radical, these terms are new terms. And I was speaking to someone earlier that the Islamic concept of, this is just an example, the Islamic concept of ghulu does not mean the English or the legal translation of extremism. The legal definition of extremism is something completely different to the Islamic concept of ghulu or definition of ghulu. We need to be careful not to use the language that is used against us by our detractors. If we have white non-Muslim academics telling us that these words are problematic and they are politicized and they're used against the Muslim community to present us in a particular way, why do we go and then use this language? Let's be smart. There are so many other words. MashaAllah, the English language and the Arabic language is vast for us to use certain words to describe certain things. Before 9/11, there was no such term as extremist or non-violent extremist. Gone are the days where the term extremist is only applied to one or two groups. It now applies to people from all different groups who actually believe in mainstream Islam. So we need to familiarize ourselves with the language of propaganda. We need to be confident to complain to the regulators, the last activity that we just did. And as community leaders and representative of institutions, we need to encourage the congregation, our local community to do this as well in a coordinated fashion. This is something which the Jewish community does very well. That they mobilize and they send action alerts and they will basically send complaints. Some organizations do this already, they help us do this. So like there's an organization called MEND and a few others, they'll send action alerts out. But don't rely on Muslim organizations to do this. As a community, as a town and as a city, learn how to identify the problematic nature of certain reports and file complaints to regulators in a coordinated fashion. Strengthen the narrative of Islam and Muslims. Brothers, sisters, respected elders and ulama. If we do not strengthen this narrative of Islam, wallahi, with the many challenges that we face and that the youth are facing, we are going to find ourselves in a very difficult situation in the years to come. Whether it be atheism, whether it's questioning the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's questioning the very legitimacy and authenticity of the prophetic tradition, whether it be asking why someone cannot be attracted to the same sex, a whole host of different issues, If we don't, especially as those who are people of knowledge and those who are learning the sacred sciences, if we do not take a leadership role in providing the solutions and the answers, wallahi, the children and the youth and even grown adults will find that information and those answers elsewhere. And last but not least, and I'll conclude on this, many of you I see here are, if not aspiring scholars and imams, you already are. Our beloved Prophet ﷺ gave the lofty status of the ulama as being inheritors of the prophets. But many have said that this has a caveat. Not everyone is an inheritor of the Prophet or the prophets. Those who are the inheritors of the prophets are those who actually fulfill the obligation and the duties which the prophets embarked on. And wallahi, the vast majority of the prophets and the Anbiya, may Allah's peace and blessing be upon them all, they had many, many difficult challenges. But they held firm. They kept the Jama'ah and their community together. They gave the relevant training and knowledge that was needed to survive, not just survive, to propel and advance as a community. And I pray that every single person in attendance today, and every single person that was involved in the organization and the facilitation of this training, that inshallah that you will have the lofty status of being an inheritor of the Prophet, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, ameen, for your patience. Any good that I said and every good that I said was for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and any mistake and error was mine alone. Assalamu alaikum. Barakallahu feek.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair to Brother Dili Hussain for such a eye-opening and insightful lecture. How did everyone find it? Then can you all do me a favor? Mufti Sahib has asked, and I'm asking you all to write some feedback, either in written feedback or if you want via oral video feedback. For written feedback, please can you go and see Brother Abir? And for audio, oral or visual, see Brother Rayhan. It'll only take a few minutes, but it does help us as an organization to know what courses to produce for the future. So on behalf of Darul Ilm and Mufti Tawsir, I'd like to thank Masjid Al Falaah for allowing us to host this event, and especially thank Brother Dili for coming and providing such an excellent topic. And I pray that all of you have a safe journey back home. There is food for everybody upstairs. I forgot to announce that one. There's biryani and I don't know what else is up there, but after Asr, everybody is welcome. Make sure you come and eat as much as possible. جزاكم الله خيرا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.
الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
بعد الله استووا استقيموا واعتدلوا حاذوا بين المناكب والأقدام سدوا الخلل استووا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من عذاب القبر ومن عذاب النار ومن فتنة المحيا والممات ومن شر فتنة المسيح الدجال.